After much waiting and speculation that it might not see the light of day, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, managed to beat the odds and be released in theaters, making it the fourth such completely original film starring the Looney Tunes and the first of them to be totally animated and not a hybrid film. And today, I'd like to give my general thoughts on this movie and how good I thought it was. Now please keep in mind that, while I will be doing some of my typical analysis here, this will mostly be just me giving my own opinions as opposed to facts. So if for any reason that doesn't appeal to you, you're most definitely free to click off the video. And there will also be major spoilers for The Day the Earth Blew Up ahead. So if you haven't seen it yet and don't want to know what happens, do not proceed any further. This will be the one and only spoiler warning I'll be giving out. So don't say I didn't warn you. Okay, so to cut right to the chase, how exactly did I feel about this movie? Well, as a lifelong fan of Looney Tunes, I can honestly say that I liked it very much. In my opinion, it felt like the type of Looney Tunes movie that might have been made in the late 1950s if Warner Brothers had tasked the animation department with making a feature-length film centered around the Looney Tunes. Especially because the director said that science fiction B movies of the time were a major inspiration, and it shows. In the end, this movie feels like an extremely sincere love letter to Looney Tunes and those who love it, and to that end is not ashamed to embrace what the Looney Tunes were really all about. And once again, as a man who's loved Looney Tunes for a very long time, a sentiment like that is really appreciated. Because this isn't some type of CGI parody of Looney Tunes that throws in a ton of modern humor and pop culture references. This movie understands what the Looney Tunes are all about and only does the bare minimum in terms of updating it. Heck, the fact that it was actually a theatrically released film made entirely with traditional animation, which is very well done, I'd like to add, proves that alone. And that might also be why Daffy trying to become an influencer by making a bunch of lowbrow butt humor based videos, only for the whole thing to completely backfire, might just be one of the funnier gags in the film. Because not only is that most definitely not how being an influencer works, but it perfectly shows how things like that have no business in a Looney Tunes movie if played straight, and would only be a disaster. As I already said, the people behind this movie completely understand what made Looney Tunes so special, and isn't afraid to embrace that, rather than try and appeal to more modern viewers. But as far as the plot goes, it tells its story a lot better than it had any right to. Because on paper, the idea of an alien trying to mind control the human race through chewing gum, and only Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and a flavor-obsessed Petunia can stop him and save the day, might sound ridiculous, but in execution it not only manages to be just that, but actually be pretty touching in a few places as well. And that's another important thing this movie gets right. Because as I went on about in my video on Space Jam: A New Legacy, which you can find a link in the description to, one of the biggest problems with that movie is that it tries to inject a bunch of melodrama and a serious story into a movie starring the freaking Looney Tunes. And the results most definitely did not work. Because as I even said in the video, nobody goes to a Looney Tunes movie to cry. They want to see a bunch of wacky humor and zany antics. That's what the Looney Tunes are all about. And not only does this movie understand a lot better by keeping the melodrama and serious moments down to a minimum, but knows how to execute the few dramatic moments it does have so that they come across as impactful rather than out of place. Like, for example, Porky's growing distrust of Daffy and his antics is a constant presence throughout the film, but it never really becomes the centerpiece of it. And when they finally do have their inevitable falling out, it's undercut by how much the alien invader is enjoying their argument. And when they just as inevitably apologize to each other, it's once again played more for comedy than drama between the over-the-top crying, Daffy suddenly having a car to smash his head on, and their tears being enough to free them from their cell. In other words, the movie understands that people are coming for a good laugh, and thus present an undercurrent of seriousness that's constantly interrupted by humor, which is exactly what a Looney Tunes movie should do. And as a result, it only serves to make the few times the movie does get serious hit that much harder, particularly when it comes to anything pertaining to Farmer Jim. Seriously, who knew that a weirdly animated farmer who's presented as raising Daffy and Porky could not only be portrayed as a paragon and person they both look up to, but actually represent the entire emotional core of the movie and have it actually work? Though what also helps is that the love everybody working on this had for Looney Tunes is extremely obvious, which goes a long way in making the more serious moments come across as more sincere than they probably would have been otherwise. And on that topic, another thing this movie gets right is the decision to focus solely on Porky Pig and Daffy Duck and nobody else, not even Bugs Bunny. Because as I explained in my video on Looney Tunes Back in Action, which you can also find a link in the description to, what's often lost on people is that the individual Looney Tunes characters worked because they all had different brands and styles of humor. What made Foghorn Leghorn funny is very different from what made the Tasmanian Devil funny, for example. And that's one of the biggest problems previous movies of theirs faced, trying to find a way to incorporate so many fundamentally different styles together into something coherent, even if some did do that better than others. So here, they don't even try and instead stick to only two characters who work well and complement their specific styles of humor, especially because Porky and Daffy were often paired together in the classic shorts. But that being said, Petunia is also done perfectly here, I must say, because she doesn't steal the spotlight from Daffy and Porky, Porky's crush on her doesn't take over the narrative, she's given a personality that works well in a Looney Tunes setting, being a genius-level nerd who's maybe a bit too obsessed with flavor and thus, as Daffy even says, puts things in her mouth that no person should ever put in their mouth, and fills her role in the story perfectly, because she easily could have come across as an unwelcomed or useless addition, but making her a scientist who's nonetheless very nice was the perfect way to use her, especially in the setting of an alien invasion parody. To put it simply, for the first time she's ever been used in a major capacity in a Looney Tunes production, the writers absolutely nailed her inclusion in the story, to the point that it can honestly be said that it wouldn't be as good without her. But speaking of that, there is one other character that must be given special mention here, which is that of the villain, the alien invader. Now let me just get the obvious out of the way first and say that I did not see the plot twist that he was trying to save Earth coming. But at the same time, I will say that it was executed better than any of Disney's attempts to do something similar. Not that that's saying much. And this mainly comes down to the fact that he serves the role of the villain for long enough that it feels as if the story has one anyway, as he essentially causes the entire conflict and still makes for a threat for the heroes to overcome, as well as that it all is subtly foreshadowed before the reveal. Like, for example, in his first scene, he mentions that when he's done, everybody will bow before him and hand over their precious resources resource that he desires so badly. And one has to admit, saving the planet would indeed result in that outcome. And there's also the fact that both times he tries to dispose of Daffy and Porky, he does so in a non-lethal way. The first time trying to get his gum to brainwash them like everybody else, and the second time throwing them in a cell with barriers that only taser them. Again, it may all be very subtle, but at least some setup is there. And finally, there's also that his scenes with the brainwashed scientist may just be among the funniest in the entire movie. Seriously, this movie absolutely nails the hilariously hammy and over-the-top evil scientist paired with an extremely bumbling sidekick dynamic. And as I noted before, that's a major reason why the twist works, because it still offers up plenty of villainous shenanigans for most of the runtime anyway. And not to mention, there's also the fact that in a lot of science fiction movies that this film is parodying, it'll often turn out that the aliens, monsters, or whatever else it might be are actually misunderstood and not evil at all, as I even went into in my video on Mars Attacks, which you can also find a link in the description too, which helps make it feel less out of place than in many Disney films. And I just have to say, I knew the resource he was going after was going to be something ridiculous, but I must admit, Boba is probably one of the funniest things it could have been. And befitting a character in a Looney Tunes movie, he could have pretty much avoided the entire conflict if he simply came down to Earth and said, "Hey, there's a giant asteroid that'll wipe out the entire planet. I know how to stop it, and if you give me all your boba, I'll tell you how." Instead of turning everyone into zombies and making himself out to be some alien overlord trying to destroy the world. But it wouldn't have been as funny if he had done it that way, would it? And honestly, that's probably one of the best things about The Day the Earth Blew Up. It understands how to use Looney Tunes style humor and doesn't rely on trends or modern jokes to sell itself to audiences. As I said at the start, this is one film that's absolutely not ashamed to be what it is, and as a result is a completely sincere ode and love letter to the golden age of classic Looney Tunes, and is a movie that any fan of the cartoons would heavily appreciate. Warner Brothers itself might not be too interested in them anymore, but at least this movie got made and released to show that there are still people out there who love these types of cartoons and that they most definitely have a place in the modern era. Now, it would be nice if Warner Brothers treated one of their most iconic brands with due respect, and maybe they will, but only time will tell as far as that goes. But until that day comes, there will always be The Day the Earth Blew Up to prove that Looney Tunes can truly beat the odds no matter what's stacked against it by being exactly what it always was. Funny, wacky, zany, and above all, loony. Okay, that's everything I had to say on that. So now I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you believe that The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, might just be one of the best things to come from the iconic cartoon series in a long time? Or do you believe that it could have been better? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And as I said at the start, you do not have to agree with me about anything I said in this video if you don't want to. You are entitled to your own opinion and can feel about The Day the Earth Blew Up and Looney Tunes in general however you'd like, and nobody can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. I very appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.